Hey, it's Matt, and before we get started with this week's show, I just wanted to say this isn't a normal episode, and it's not a new episode. If you've been around since episode 1, then you probably already heard this, because this week we're going to re-air my conversation with Antti Niemi that was recorded way back when the UK was facing the Beast of the East, so no COVID-19 at that point, but still a disaster of some sort, albeit it was the weather. But I should also say that I'm doing something I don't normally do, which is re-air an episode. Secondly, I've had a couple of beers, and I don't normally do that. Usually drinking is reserved for after you record the show, but I was doing some yard work, so there we go. Also, I bought my neighbor some beer as a thank you, then found out his wife won't let him drink for now, so I have a lot of beer. I am enjoying that, so trying to support a local business as well. Anyway, it's all worked out so you get to hear this, which I don't know if that's good or bad. But anyway, I'm going to leave the original intro in. This episode was first aired and the intro recorded when I came back from the UK after seeing Saints play for the first time. We lost 3-0 to West Ham. I flew home. And that was that. So the jet lag is there, but I'll leave it in and you can kind of, enjoy it. You'll hear me make some excuses, mostly because I was nervous because I had never done anything like this. And this remains the only time I've ever talked to a former Saints player on the record. And I really enjoyed it. Would I have done some things differently now? Probably. But, it is what it is. I hope that you enjoy it. And also, lastly, this episode was set up by Jay Grant, who was due to be on the show this week. He runs the Southampton page on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. He's the official partner of the show. He was the original guest scheduled for this week, but I've been meaning to put this back out there because several people have asked about me potentially interviewing former players and things like that. There are some wonderful Saints podcasts out there, including the Saints FC podcast and the When the Saints podcast, that have done that in the past. And Total Saints podcast has also had some interviews with players, but this is a first for me. And really, it's not something that I planned on doing. I ever thought it would be possible or whatever it is. And it's still something that I don't really reach for because I think other people are doing a fantastic job with it. But this opportunity was given to me by Jay. And in honor of him not being able to do this episode due to sickness, by the way, Jay, hope you feel better. Here we go. So I'll leave it all there. Hope you enjoy it. We'll be back to normal next week. And until then, remember together, we march on.
You're listening to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans.
If you want to have guarantees, you have to buy a wash machine.
Monte with a scooping header.
We don't lose a match, either we win or we learn. And today we learned.
Отдача, Остин! Все-таки забил! It's infield to Mane, 25 yards out. Lovely ball for Keller. Onside, 1-0! Buffon shot! Oh my word!
Unbelievable. We ran around the pitch like Bambi on ice. It was very, very embarrassing to watch.
And now, your host, Matt Markstone.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans. My name is Matt Markstone. No matter where you are, no matter how you may be listening, thank you for making the show part of your day. I hope that you enjoy it. And this is one of your first episodes. Maybe you joined us last week for the live episode with the guys from The Ugly Inside and also the gentleman from the London Saints to help celebrate 30 and 40 years, respectively, of being around and giving Saints fans a voice and celebrating kind of everything that Saints are and going to away days and things like that. Welcome to the show. If that was your first introduction, most weeks it will be slightly different than that, but it is nice to get to meet and work with and talk with in person several of the people that I've spoken with over the year and a half that this podcast has been around. And this episode is also a first. On this episode, I spoke with a former player, spoke with Antti Niemi, and many of you who have been around a while will know who Antti Niemi is. You were around for his career at Saints. You will recall the Talk Sport caller incident, the guy trying to figure out why he hadn't been capped by Scotland and all this stuff. And it's great. And Antti is fantastic, and he was wonderful to give me so much of his time. But I can just tell you that this is never something that I thought that I would be doing. I never thought that I would be interviewing former players. I never thought that was kind of my place as a newer Saints fan. And what I mean by that is the fact that I've only kind of been watching the team for the past 3, 4, 5 years. I wasn't around to see Antti Niemi play. I wasn't, everything that I've seen from him comes from highlight videos and things like that. And because of that, I never really have reached out to any former players. I've never tried to get any of them on. And John, who runs the Saints FC podcast, he does a lot of that. And I think it's great. And I always enjoy listening because I don't know those guys. I don't know those players. And so to hear them and to hear him get to talk about kind of, sometimes, they're even older than he is. They played before he ever watched, but usually he gets to recall all these kind of incidences where he watched them play and where he, these incidents were stuck out in his mind as he grew up and as they kind of had an impact on him. And that doesn't, I don't have that, and someday down the line I will, of course, because I've been watching Saints now for a few years. So of course, as players start to retire, maybe we can do that. But for that reason, this episode is something special, probably not something that you will get a lot of from me, but still a wonderful opportunity for me to be able to talk to Antti Niemi about his time as a professional and his time at Saints. And I think it went well. I can tell you that I when I found out about this interview, because I didn't set it up. This was actually set up for me by Jamie Grant, who runs the Saints Report. He did all the legwork. He put it all together. And at the very end, it was kind of Antti, this is Matt, this is Antti, talk. And so it was, we did, and it was great. And it all happened really fast. So I had a very short amount of time to kind of read up on Antti and look him up and become familiar with his career. And that was a really, really fun experience for me because, like I said before, I didn't know much about him prior to that. And now when you mention him, I mean, he even made the Ugly Insides starting 11, the Ugly Inside 11 over the past 30 years. They chose him as their goalkeeper. So he was a wonderful shot stopper. You can look up all kinds of YouTube videos on him stopping shots and doing things like that. And it was great. So I just really, really appreciate Antti's time. Jamie, thank you for setting it up. And I did reach out to a couple of people that I wanted to note here before we started the show. Lee Callender, who is the goalkeeping coach and the assistant coach for Southampton Women's Football Club. He kind of led me down the path of asking some questions. And I also did talk to Michael Kern a little bit about this. So thank you to you two gentlemen as well as Jamie for kind of helping me out and getting me all kind of set up. And so I can tell you that what I did was I tried to look up and read about some of the other interviews he had done. So I wasn't asking the same questions, try to build on some of those questions and being, not a professional interviewer, somebody who tries to do it and tries to get better at it, but it is definitely not professional. You will see that some of my questions kind of fall kind of flat, but I've left them in because Antti was nice enough to answer them and work with me. And so, this is basically almost all of the interview that we had. So I chose not to cut very much of it out. And so I had originally recorded this intro a long time ago, kind of when I did the episode. But now I am sitting here in my home. We arrived home last night on our trip back from the UK. I went to bed. I woke up this morning and now I'm sitting here doing this. And it's back to work tomorrow, kind of back to normal. So you can expect kind of more normal-ish episodes. We'll resume next week. So anyway, I hope that you enjoy this. If you do, please let me know. If you don't, if you think that, there were a lot of things that could have gone better, also let me know, because that any kind of feedback is always good. And like I said, this is not necessarily something that I will aim to do a lot, because I think John does a great job with that over on the Saints FC podcast. But, sometimes opportunities present itself and you have to kind of take them. And so that's what this is. And I hope that you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed talking to Antti Niemi. So without further ado, here is my interview with Antti Niemi, former Saints goalkeeper, former Finnish national team goalkeeper, and still works with the Finnish national team on a coaching level. So here it is. I hope that you enjoy it. And I'll talk to you on the other side of the interview.
we'd like to welcome to the show Antti Niemi, former goalkeeper for Finland, played a few years at Southampton as well as other teams in the UK and all over Europe. So, Antti, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join me.
Oh, thank you. No problem at all. No problem.
You mentioned you're living back in Finland. What's the weather like? That Europe has been, or England has been undergoing some sort of extreme cold front with some snow. But what's it look like for you right now?
Yeah, it's been news here as well that the UK is suffering a little bit at the moment. So we call it the normal weather here. It's actually been a pretty nice winter this year. I live in Helsinki, which is it's in southern part of Finland, so we don't necessarily get like a proper winter like we do in northern part of Finland, where I'm actually originally from. And this winter's been really nice. Over the last 2 weeks, we had a lot of snow, and it's been between -10, -20 for a couple of weeks. And I like it. I like fall season, and that's one of the reasons I like living in Finland. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea that sometimes it gets really cold, but I have no problem with it.
That -20, and you're talking Celsius, right? Not Fahrenheit?
Yeah.
No, where I live, it's, I basically don't own pants, so I don't know if I could hack it there.
No, you get used to it. It's no problem. We get proper clothing on. And, actually, today it's only like -10, but it's really sunny and bright and nice. It's, in the summertime, it's obviously nice when it's like +20, 25 and sunny, but I really don't mind having a, bit of cold weather, because it's different, but it's, you get used to it when you're born here and you live here, and get used to it. And like I said, I like winter.
Now, for you, I've noticed you like to be outdoors a lot, kind of looking at your Instagram a little bit. So you guys are out and doing stuff and being outdoors when the weather's like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We go for long walks, and when the sea, never mind the lakes, but even the sea freezes, and then it's nice to walk over there. And in Finland, in general, I have few people over from, for example, from England to visit me, and no matter if it's summer or winter, people do go. They do sports, and they go for walks and jogs, and I'd like to think that Finnish people are quite active and outdoor people, and we have a beautiful nature. So all those people come over, and they're wondering, like, you see people everywhere just going for walks and for jogs and cross country skiing and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I'd like to think that Finnish people are quite active, and I try to do the same. I'm not getting any younger now.
So now that you're kind of in retirement now, but like what does a normal day look like for you now that you're not training each and every day?
Yeah, I'm not involved in club football now, so I stayed in football. I've done my UEFA A license and UEFA goalkeeping A license, and I'm actually I'm head of the goalkeeping education in Finnish FA, and it's a lot of work. And also not just the coaching education, but I've been with the senior national team for the last 7-8 years now, and I spend roughly about 40 days a year with the senior national team, and then on top of that, I have coaching education. Yesterday, I spent the day watching boys under 14s, which is like the first age group that we're starting to scouting basically, and before that it's a bit different because they're so young, but anything to do with goalkeeping, coaching education, national teams, youth national teams, talent groups, that sort of stuff, I'm involved. It's a good job. I like it because, sometimes you have a little bit more time. You can have 1 or 2 weeks that you don't have that much work to do, and then you can have 2 or 3 weeks when there's literally every day something that needs to be done. And I was lucky enough to be a professional footballer, and that's all I know basically. So I'm enjoying my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned you kind of grew up in northern Finland.
Yes.
And with that, I'm sure, like you mentioned, the weather and things like that. But even with everybody being outdoors, were there a lot of opportunities for you to play or engage in a number of sports growing up and outside of football, or was it mostly just football?
Yes, I grew up in the city called Oulu. It's in the northern part of Finland, and when we talk about the weather early. I remember going to secondary school, like when I was about 14, 15. We could have like, I remember one winter we had 2 weeks spell when we had minus 42, and that was cold, but we still managed to get into school, and so all good. But Oulu, the city I'm from, it's a very the football used to be, or still is. It's a big thing, but Finland in general and Oulu especially is ice hockey town as well. And but ironically, I never played ice hockey, which is normally people talk about Finnish men. Everybody's tried ice hockey at some point, but I was never interested in ice hockey. I like to watch it nowadays, but I never played ice hockey. But I tried different sports like boxing, track and field, that sort of stuff. So we were really active at that time. But you have to remember that we're talking late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s. The world was different, altogether. We didn't have any computers or mobile phones or anything like that. So we were spending our time literally. We were outside all the time and normally doing sports as well. So it was a different world.
I don't know if you know, there's another goalie, but a hockey goalie by the same name as you that plays. And so
he plays for Montreal now.
Yeah. And so when somebody was mentioning your name, I'm growing up in America. I've seen him around for a long time. I'm not a huge hockey fan, but he's fairly well known. And it was like, I had to do some Googling and make sure I was talking about the right person before I look like a real idiot. But but where does football stand now in relation to ice hockey in terms of where what people do in Finland? Is football kind of one of the top sports, or is it well below ice hockey, or how does that work out in Finland for you?
Yeah, football is I think it's the biggest sport if you look at the numbers, or it is the biggest sport. And it's growing up all the time, more and more kids are playing football nowadays. And it's always been, a pretty big thing in Finland. But obviously we have to compete with ice hockey and floorball and track and field and Formula Ones and that sort of stuff. So we're a bit different from some other countries where football is like the absolute number one. And then there's a big gap and then maybe something else. But, it's a bit of a different situation in Finland. And, I think ice hockey, if you ask average man on the street what is the national sport in Finland, quite a few would say ice hockey, but still I would like to think, and I know for a fact that football is the biggest sport in Finland. But, I don't mind. I like ice hockey, and I think it's a good thing that, people are doing sports. And, like I said, I like ice hockey. But as a footballing man, I'm going to also that football is a bigger thing.
Absolutely. So as you were kind of growing up and your football career was starting to take shape, was there anybody in football or outside of football that you really looked up to and used kind of as inspiration?
Well, the city I grew up in, like they won the Finnish league back in 79-80, a couple of years in a row, and they're not playing in the Finnish Premier League at the moment, but they were the best team in Finland at the time, which was quite funny because normally the league was won in Helsinki or somewhere else. But that's one of the reasons probably why I started to play football, because the people you used to look up to, they were living in your own city and winning games, and my cousins were playing football, and that's probably why I started to play football. And so my hometown team was probably the first footballing team I was following, and then Liverpool was doing really well at the time. They were ruling the Europe, winning the cups and all that, and they were a big team. And Premier League has always been big in Finland, or the English football. I remember those black and white TV Saturday afternoons when there was always English football on telly, and so that's probably my first memory from football anyway. And obviously later on, when I was a little bit older, Jean-Marie Pfaff was my first goalkeeping idol. He was a Belgian goalkeeper, doing really well. And then a little bit later, Peter Schmeichel when he was playing for Denmark. And then obviously after that, there's so many, not too many to mention really.
So as you kind of began to play, and when did your professional career really start? And when did you realize that you maybe had a career in the professional game, and this could be your life essentially?
Yeah, it's a question that's been asked from me quite often. And like I said earlier, like I grew up in the 70s, and I was teen in the early mid 80s. And at the time, we had a couple of players playing in Sweden. So for me, when I was training football and playing football when I was a kid and a young man, it was never an option to be a professional footballer. So I'd love to give you an answer that when I was 12 or 13, I gave everything to football so that I could become a Premier League player. But that wasn't the case. I would be lying if I said so. I was just having fun with my friends and playing football and doing different sports, and it was a normal life for me. But I would say, if you ask me, when did you realize that you could make a living out of football or move abroad to play football? I was probably 18, 19, because I got into the Finnish under-21s when I was about 19. So I was a little bit younger than most of the players. And we had some good results. We beat Sweden and we beat France away. I remember the team, they had players playing in the French league and, a couple of big names. And that was probably the first time when I was about 19, 20 that I realized that, I'm in a team where we beat France and Sweden and we're competing well against the really good players. Why not? And that's early 90s, and football was changing slowly, and we had more players playing abroad. So, probably when I was about 20, I thought I was already playing in the Finnish league. I don't count that as a professional footballer, even if it was a full-time, not job, but I was playing football full-time. I was doing some studies, but football was my thing, and I was playing at the highest level in Finland. But to play abroad and be a professional footballer and, playing in England, that never crossed my mind until I was about 20. That's what I would say.
So what was it like for you then to move, when you moved from the team in Helsinki that you played for a number of years over to FC Copenhagen? Was that a difficult transition in terms of just culture and level of play and everything else?
Yes, everything included. And I wasn't looking back when I'm 46 in a few months and looking back into a career and, what you used to be as a human being. It was a pure luck that I ended up in FC Copenhagen. The FA president, who sadly passed away last year, he played in Denmark when he was younger, and FC Copenhagen was a new club. It wasn't the club that FC Copenhagen is at the moment. At the moment, they're probably the biggest club in Scandinavia, and but they were like a new club in Copenhagen, and they had a goalkeeper who was injured, and they were really panicking, and they called the gentleman I just mentioned, that is there any Finnish goalkeepers playing in Finland that we could get, in quickly. And he mentioned my name, and, things went from there. They kind of trusted his word, and I got there and I played there for a season and a half. But the beginning was really, really tough for me because at the time, Finnish league wasn't the best, and Danish football was 5 years ahead of us, like in every single department. And so it wasn't... I got there, I played, I had a good game, I had a bad game, so I was very inconsistent, and I probably didn't quite understand what, a real professional football is about. But at the end, the second season, I played the whole season. I got awarded for, by the fans as a player of the year, and I had good games there, and I was lucky enough to move forward.
Yeah, and the next move came over to Rangers, is that correct?
Yes, and it's a funny story. This is, education for every single footballer around the world, because you need luck as well. And like I mentioned earlier, I was playing for FC Copenhagen, but I was very inconsistent. I had a good game, bad game, good game, bad game, a decent game. And I know the game that they came to see, but they weren't. Glasgow Rangers wasn't there to watch me. They were watching one of our midfield players. And I remember the game, and we played against Brøndby, which is a local derby. I think it was a League Cup semi-final, and I had a wonderful game. We beat them. I think we finished 2-0, but we could have easily lost the game. I made some, I really had luck on my side on that day, and I managed to make some good saves in that game. And apparently they thought that, they have all the money in the world, and this kid looks good, and, we might need, another goalkeeper, and I ended up in there. But that's another story. Actually, I went to UK, and I kind of agreed to sign for Coventry, and the Rangers came in the last second. I was having breakfast with my agent in Coventry in a hotel, about to go to the Coventry Stadium to sign off the papers. And my agent got a phone call from Glasgow Rangers saying that, has he signed yet? And it's like, no, but in about 2 hours he will. And I was sitting in the table, I was watching him like, what's happening? And he was like, yep, okay, I'll speak to him. And then he said that, we have a bit of problem, a positive problem, because Rangers just called them, they want you as well. So I said, why isn't it, fly up, and I'm not going there. I'll stay here, but you can go and listen to what they have to say. And then it came back the same night, then there was a decision.
Now, when you made the decision to go to Rangers, you didn't have as many appearances and things like that. What, at any point did you feel like maybe you made the wrong decision, or do you look back on it and say that was a real learning experience, or how do you remember that time that you were at Rangers?
I remember it well, because you have to remember that the Glasgow Rangers at the time, it was a top club, and still is a wonderful big club. But they had some problems in the last 2 years, but they're back now, which is I'm really happy about. But yes, to answer your questions, yes, I had some regrets later on. The first year, the idea was that Walter Smith, who was the manager there, Andy Borum, he wasn't getting any younger, and he had a lot of injuries, and he was still playing well. I think one of the ideas was after the first season, let's see what happens. Maybe this guy can, take his place and so on. But then Walter left, and Dick Applegatt came in, and he brought in his own goalkeepers, and it was very difficult for me. So I decided to move on, and I went to a smaller club in Scotland, which was Hearts from Edinburgh, and that's definitely a decision I never regretted. I had some, great times in there, and that made me the footballer that I became. But yeah, the Glasgow Rangers, I'm not regretting that I, managed to play, 20 odd games for them, because it's a wonderful club. But purely professionally looking, back, I probably could have done something else. But it's very hard when you're 23, 24, and Glasgow Rangers comes in, and you have to remember that it was a massive club full of international stars at the time. So it was very difficult to say no.
Yeah, absolutely. When you moved to Hearts, what was different about that? What, was it just that there wasn't a manager there that had brought in all of their own, like you were the guy that they were bringing in, kind of, or what, because you had a lot more appearances, and you seem to really, reading back through some of the things that you mentioned about Hearts, you seem to really, really enjoy your time there. And so, like, what was different there?
Well, it was a smaller club. Well, we had a great team spirit. We had some decent teams. I joined the team when I think they were 9th in the league, and we ended up 3rd. And the same happened next year. We finished 3rd in the league, which was, the mini championship, because everybody knew what the top 2 teams are going to be every year. Celtic and Rangers. And I went there because I remember when they called, and Dick Applegatt asked me to his office, and he said that we had an offer from Hearts. And he said to me, he was a fantastic coach. He was really strict and almost like scary sometimes, but he was very honest, and that's a good quality to any manager. He said that, Antti, I think you're a good goalkeeper, but you're not going to play there unless there's a lot of injuries. So you have. He said that, I think you should go somewhere else, so you can show the people how good you are. And that kind of like, I didn't think about it, for too long. I realized that if I wanted to make a good career, I have to take maybe one step back and play football. Because after all, we were playing in the same league, so people would see me.
Right.
And that was probably the one single decision I made during my career that really, it was a good one. And after that, I spent 2.5 years in Hearts, and I can honestly say that I have purely good memories from my time in there, on and off the pitch.
All right. And then comes the move to Southampton, right? After your time at Hearts. And when you made that move, what, I guess going from the Scottish Premier League to the English Premier League, or what for you, I guess, what was the level of competition that was different? What were you thinking when you were coming into Southampton, and kind of what was it, what you expected once you got on the pitch?
I was, well, first of all, when I had a phone call that, the club agreed to sell me to Southampton, I was obviously happy, because that was doing so well in Scotland for the last 2.5 years. I knew that I could do the job if I get another chance. And but obviously it's a bit of a. I was nervous. I was thinking, how will this go? Because this is the top league. league. Obviously, just a normal feeling that any player would have. But I was quite confident that, and actually, when I started playing for Southampton, somebody asked me after a couple of games, it started really well. I had a clean sheet against Charlton and so on. And I took my place as a number one. Somebody asked me, like, how does it feel like, is it more difficult? And I was like, it sounds funny, but it's not. Because your own players, defenders mainly, they're doing the right things. And the strikers, they are doing the right things. So it's actually a little bit more easier to read the game. And you have to remember that we had, as a centre-half, we had people like Michael Svensson, Klaus Lundekvam, and my strength was shot-stopping and making like reaction saves and that sort of stuff. So I wasn't very dominating goalkeeper. I wasn't tall. I had to rely on my, how should I describe it, like skills to stop the ball. And I had two centre-halves who were really good in the air, and the chemistry was working really well. So I knew my role. The centre-half knew their role. They knew when I was coming out from my goal and when I was staying on the line, and mainly I was staying on the line. I'm not sure it's a good thing, but, the chemistry was there. And so I found it slightly more easier to play in the Premier League than in Scottish, Premier League. I know it sounds a bit daft, but that's how I felt. It was more logical, even if the players were, a little bit better and so on.
No, I think to me that makes sense because you learn, this is where everybody should be. This is what the center half should be doing. This is what the forward is trained to do. And if everybody does that, then you have some idea. But if everybody's just kind of running around crazy, kind of chickens with the head cut off, it's much more difficult to predict. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, exactly spot on.
Now you played. I think you had more official appearances for Southampton than any other club that you played for during your career, and it's pretty close with some of the numbers.
I think at heart I had something like, I really can't remember, but I would say roughly the same amount, 120 something for both clubs.
Now, do you?
I might be wrong.
No, it's. The numbers are always every website has different numbers, so who knows? But when you think back about your time there, do you remember that time as being any different than any other places, or is it just are all of these kind of clubs? Because it's not like you played for 15 different clubs. You played for a kind of a smaller number, but do you remember Southampton being any kind of different or no?
No, I enjoyed it. I had great memories from Southampton. Obviously, I was there for 3.5 years, and the last season that we played in the Premier League, we got relegated. So it was really pity because I'm still like a bit ashamed, and I feel guilty about it that we couldn't stay in the Premier League. But thank God they're back in this time and doing well. So. But I remember because Southampton is not like compared to London or Glasgow or something. It's quite a small place, to be honest. And the football was a big thing there. And, when we were walking about, people recognized us and so on. And it was a big thing for the city. And when I got to the team, the last, quite a few years before that, they were always struggling a little bit. They were fighting against the relegation, then, Letizia came in and scored a goal and they stayed up. That was the picture. That's how people saw Southampton. And we actually, in the first 2 seasons, we did pretty well. I think we did really well if you think about the competition. We finished, I think, 7th or 8th. I think 8th and 12th. Which was good, and we had the cup final and everything. So there was, the whole city was enjoying it, not just us, the players and the coaches stuff. So I'm looking back and smiling.
Now, I have here in my notes, you kind of had both extreme highs and lows because, as you mentioned, you had the cup final, you had the high league finishes, and then you had that season where you were relegated, and then you stayed with them when they went down to second division, and then eventually you left for Fulham. But if we can pause kind of here and talk a little bit about Saints and just that time. You mentioned when you were leaving Fulham, you did an interview with their media team about kind of your time at all these clubs, and you said that Saints at that time were lacking maybe a little bit of leadership in the dressing room, somebody to kind of shake things up and wake everybody up and let them know that they were fighting against relegation. And looking back on that, at that point in your career, you were kind of in your 30s, I think. And do you? I mean, I don't want to put this on you, but do you feel like a little bit of guilt, a little bit of responsibility? Like maybe that somebody should have stepped up, or what was it that didn't happen when you guys were there?
Yeah, the whole season, it was like, after the 2 good seasons we had before, and then Gordon Strachan left, And anybody who's met Gordon Strachan, he's a tiny guy, but he's got a great aura about him. He's a big character, and he was the real leader, and he set up the standard every single day in the training sessions. And, when we went to the game, he was always saying that be the best teammate you can be to a friend. And, that's all like basic stuff. And we didn't have the best players. We had some talent like Wayne Bridge and, James Beattie and stuff like that. But we didn't have any star names, so we were doing really well. And, when he left, it was really, really big point for me personally. I really like Gordon Strachan. And then obviously two names I mentioned earlier, we lost, Wayne Bridge and James Beattie, and, it was a bit of a mess, going into that third season. So I was expecting some sort of troubles. I was expecting a very difficult season, never thinking that we would go down. It happened. But I think it's more like, when you're losing a lot of games and what I meant about the, lacking the leadership, and because everybody's confidence was down. And when I look at Premier League now and I see, the club being at the bottom the whole season, I know exactly how they're feeling. And they're trying to do everything they can, and then, doesn't work out. It's just the confidence thing really, and we have some, players in the dressing room that you could be involved. I have to say that I lost my self-confidence during that season, because I had 2 seasons, and then, the team wasn't performing, and, I had some games that I should have done better. And, it's just there's a big circle that goes around, all the things affect on other things, and it's just a nightmare the whole season. That's one of the seasons that the only season really that I look back into and say, that, if I had any chance to wipe that out, then I would do it. But, that happened, and, there's nothing we can do about it anymore. And,
right.
About your question, like, do I feel guilt? Yes, of course I do, because, I wasn't a junior player anymore. Maybe I could have done more. But then again, I have to say that I was never, if you talk about leaders, it's something that you're born with, like Gordon Strachan. It's very difficult to explain, but some people have that. And I'm very laid back. I'm very before I went onto the pitch, I was yawning, and, I wasn't shouting or screaming. I'm always the same, I'm same at home than I'm, before going into the game that, when there's 50,000 people watching, there's no difference. It doesn't come naturally from me. I'm not that kind of guy. And maybe answering your question, maybe we should have had 1 or 2 people in the team that, were different from me or from some other players.
All right. Now,
I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
no, I think it was. That's great. That's great. No, you're great. Sometimes I think I go on too long with a question. I should just ask a question and let you answer instead of talking for so long. But I'm sorry. still new at this. So, but okay. So looking, you mentioned when we were talking, setting this up, that you pay attention to the Saints results, but they're down there in the bottom of the table. There are a lot of similarities to, your time there. They had some really high finishes. They've reached a cup final. They're going deep in the FA Cup this year, but we're down towards the bottom of the table. Do you think they kind of have what it takes to get out of the relegation zone now? I mean, a lot of their,
at the moment.
Yeah.
At the moment, definitely. I think there is 3 teams in the league that are worse than Southampton at the moment. I'm hoping and I'm confident that they won't get relegated this year. They have too much talent in the team. That's my honest opinion, and I sincerely hope that I'm right. I'm confident. I would be very surprised if they go down.
All right. I do have one question. You mentioned Peter Schmeichel earlier. When, having kind of, I don't know if you looked up to him but he was definitely one of those guys that everybody knew. He's one of those kind of goalkeeping kind of, legends, I guess. And describe what it was like the first time you lined up in the tunnel across from him. You're stepping on the same pitch as him. What's going through your head? How do you feel at that moment, looking over and seeing Peter Schmeichel there?
It was surreal. He was end of his career. He was playing for, and thank God I managed to get on the same pitch with him, because he was my hero. And I remember it really, really well. When you're 45 and you play quite a few games, and you look back, you don't remember all the games and how they finished and how it went and so on. But I still remember it was like yesterday. I hadn't played too many games for Southampton. I think it was our first season there. and he was playing for Man City, and we had a home game against them. And we were already in a tunnel. Our team was in a tunnel waiting for Man City to come out from their dressing room. And then they came out, and I was like trying to act cool because I knew who was coming. In 2 seconds, he was going to stand next to me, and I'm just this newcomer, basically nobody. And I was going on the pitch with my childhood hero, and they're easily one of the best goalkeepers ever. And I was so nervous, but I was trying to act really cool, like, okay, when is he coming? Hurry up, we're going to change the player. And then he comes out and stands next to me. I couldn't bear to turn first, because normally goalkeepers, they always, shake hands and say, good luck, because it's kind of a goalkeeping thing. And so he came to me and tapped my shoulder and said, good luck, Antti. And that was for 2 seconds, I was like, shit. I'm not sure if I can say that on.
Yeah, you're
radio,
fine. You're fine.
And I was literally thinking, oh my God, Peter Schmeichel knew my name. So I turned, I was like, all right, yeah, good luck, Peter, yeah. Well, I still remember it was yesterday. I was so nervous, and then he was so nice, and he was like, he knew my name, and we were like, I remember thinking when we actually stepped from the tunnel onto the pitch, and we heard the crowd and everything. I was thinking, okay, Antti, now you reached something, you done something with your life, and it was a wonderful feeling. And then he had a blind. I remember the game after we finished 0-0, and he made 12 unbelievable saves, and I was thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to get to this level. He's he's an older guy now playing for Man City, and he's still making those saves. I remember the game; he was fantastic in that game. So it was a wonderful memory.
Now, when I don't know if you want to talk about the FA Cup final. There's always that thing out there about you having to come off. Making the cup final and that you come up with a calf injury and have to be subbed off. But what can you describe what it was like to play in the final? And I know it wasn't at Wembley; it was in Cardiff. But what was that like?
Yeah, it was brilliant. The whole season was nice, and then the cup final just capped it off. We knew that after the last game of the season, I needed a knee surgery. I had a problem with my meniscus and my ligament, and I was talking to I think it was the last game of the season with Charlton. I didn't play in that game because I wanted to save my knee. And then we made the decision that, I was speaking to the doctor and, the medical staff, and I was like, I want to play. I need to play in this game. It's a cup final. I won't miss it. And they were like, Antti, you're going to a surgery. Think twice. But I said, no. There's no option. Do whatever you need to do, and then, see what happens. And they injected my knee before the game I don't know what the word is, to make it numb so that the pain wasn't there.
Uh-huh.
And obviously when you inject something in your joint, the human body is quite, funny, it reacts. And I didn't have any feelings during the game. I was, enjoying the game, the atmosphere. If I remember right, I made some saves, I was having a good day. And then it was a goal kick, and there was no feelings whatsoever. Everything was fine. And then my calf just went bang, and it was because of the injection and whatever.
Right.
And then I had surgery next week. And, the cup final itself, I remember the first memory I had, the press conference 3 days before the cup final, and there was this sea of microphones in front of us. There was microphones, and you see all this, the markings and the athletes and everything from all over the world, and then you realize how big the FA Cup is. There was people from all over the world coming into UK and follow the cup final, all the media and that sort of stuff. And then I remember going onto the pitch, not on the warm-up, when we got to the stadium and we were, inspecting the pitch and just walking about and enjoying the atmosphere. The Saints end was pretty much getting full. It was yellow. It was like a sea of yellow. And the Arsenal fans on the other side of the stadium, obviously, is massive, the Millennium Stadium. But I wasn't nervous at all. I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. It's wonderful to be here, no matter what happens. And I think that the fact that, Arsenal was, it was the best team in the country at the time, and they were the clear favourites. But we gave them a good game, and, with a bit of a luck, we could have maybe scored, one goal at the end, and, they were probably the better team on the day, and I remember enjoying the whole day, the whole experience. It's a great memory.
Yeah. Now, I know we're running out of time, so I won't take up very much more of it. And just kind of moving on to your career at Fulham, when the wrist injury happened and eventually you had to retire, at that point in your mind, did you think you could still continue to play had it not been for the injury, or when do you think you would have stopped doing it if it wouldn't have been for the injury?
Yeah, I spent a couple of seasons with Fulham, and the first season I went there in, I think it's November, and then next season, and then we had a really difficult one. And the last season I played in the Premier League, I started as a number one, but I had so many injuries. Like I had my shoulder was getting injected every other week, and my back was hurting, and my Achilles tendon was thick, and that was getting injected. And I remember during the season, and we had a similar season to with Southampton when we got relegated. We had a couple of decent seasons, and then, the final one, we were struggling big time. There was manager changes and all that, and then Roy Hodgson came in and saved the club. And, I lost my place, few games before the season ended. I think Jesse Keller played the last, about 10 games, and then they signed in the summer. I had another season left in my contract, and they signed, you have to edit this blackout. They signed the the Australian goalkeeper.
I can't remember.
Yes, you can. He played for Middlesbrough and Fulham for a long time. I always mix him up for him. Anyway, well, they signed another goalkeeper, and I was talking with my wife, I had the wrist injury, which was going to take. The doctor said that 5 or 6 months before I'm back into the training, and we're talking pre-season here. So I thought, I'm going to miss half the season anyway. We got a new number one in, and, last year my contract. And the kids were getting into the age where they were thinking with my wife that maybe it would be time to move to Finland and they could start their school in Finland. And that's how we came up with the decision, maybe a little bit quit playing a little bit earlier than I was planning. But, you can do anything with the injuries. They happen, and, sometimes they make it easier for you. But it was funny when we had everything agreed with Fulham. I had a couple of phone calls from priests and clubs saying that don't quit yet. We would like to have the year and blah blah blah. And I was like, no, it's done. That's me. And it wasn't purely, it was mostly about the football inside and being injured a lot in the last season and having a difficult season. I wasn't enjoying the training because I went on to. I remember every morning I walked on the training and I was thinking, damn, I'm hurting. My Achilles, whatever, it wasn't fun anymore. And, that kind of made up mine for me.
Yeah.
That was it. I think it was a good time for me. I reckon I've spoken to quite a few players, who are struggling, with their knees or with their hips or with their ankles and all sorts of troubles. And they've had after they're playing. And quite a few have said that they could go back in time, they probably would have not played the last season because the injuries were worse.
Right.
So I think it was, it's just something in me says that it was probably a decent time to stop playing at professional level.
Yeah. All right. And was it Schwarzer? Mark Schwarzer? Is that the guy that came in?
Yes. Well,
okay.
Yeah. Always, because I played with Mark's Crossley, so they always mix. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's him.
All right.
Schwarzer, yeah.
And then just a few more things. I know that you moved into coaching, and I didn't ask all the fans to give me questions, but there's a guy named Lee who is a coach, a goalkeeping coach, and I asked one of his questions already because I already had it in there. But in your opinion, kind of as you're coaching players, what makes a goalkeeping coach effective or good at their job? Is there a couple of things that you can point out that either helped you or that things that you try to do with players that you coach?
Yeah, I think as a coach, you always have to, just like as a player, you have your strengths and weaknesses. There are very few coaches that I come across in the last 20 years that I can say that he can do everything. He's brilliant on everything. So I think firstly you have to recognize your strengths. It might be, anything. It could be anything. And then I think you need to be open-minded. You need to be motivated. You have to listen to different people. You have to be able to work with the other coaches because, the football has changed over the last 10, 15 years. It's not like you have your goalkeeping coach and then you have the head coach and the assistant. It's always about the team. When you're playing, it's about your teammates, and when you're coaching, it's about the team. And you have to have the chemistry to work together so you can bring out the best from the players. And goalkeeping, I think, goalkeeping coaching, it's not. I think there's a lot of people and a lot of coaches, goalkeeping coaches, who can have a big session, like, anyone can kick the ball and, make the goalkeeper make saves. But you have to have the eye for the, how can you correct things, and you have to demonstrate and stop, and you have to plan your sessions so that you can say afterwards that I think the goalkeeper learned something. It might be a minor little thing, but that's always the target before the session. I'm going to make sure that this goalkeeper realizes things during this session, and he's going to be a little bit better after this session. That's the idea. It doesn't always happen, but planning is everything, and that's how you make results. But then again, you have to remember that the time period to develop a good goalkeeper. Let's say if you start, when the goalkeeper is, let's say, 15, it's at least it takes 4, 5, 6 years when you can say that, you can see the results and so on. So you need to be patient and just work hard and set a target where you want this goalkeeper to be, because all the goalkeepers are, they're different. Something works, some things work for this goalkeeper, but, you have to treat this goalkeeper a little bit different. He has different strengths and he needs more work on this. So it's not easy, but when you have your own idea about, coaching and what sort of goalkeepers you want to improve, produce, and you plan your sessions and your long-term plans, then suddenly it's a little bit easy. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's fantastic. So let's see, the game, your game starts as soon as I have one more question. I'll skip everything else.
No problem.
So, you go fishing quite often,
I do. Yes, I like it.
If you could pick one person, whether it's from your career or whether it's now kind of in the world of football, and you could put them out there with you on the boat, for the number of hours you're out there, just to talk about whatever it is, who is that person that you would like that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to speak to in a long time or at all? Who would that person be?
Oh dear, just one person. Well, I have a tiny boat, so maybe one person is not, but there are so many. I have to say that, I've been really lucky to get, a lot of people that I respect, and I think they're wonderful human beings on and off the pitch. So many good friends I've made over the years. But it would have to be someone who's into fishing. And I know Paul Gascoigne is really into fishing, or at least he was. And he's had a lot of, problems when he stopped playing football. It's all well documented. But I had pleasure to share a dressing room with him at Glasgow Rangers for one season, even if I was a young boy and he was a world famous star. But I would like to speak to him and go fishing. He loves fishing, and just say that and tell him that he's okay, and we have our problems, different kind of problems, and hopefully he will have a better life from now on.
Yeah. All right. Well, Antti, I cannot thank you enough for your time here, for being willing to talk with some random dude from California. I appreciate it.
No problem. I like it. Southampton thing. So I'm always happy to speak to people.
And I hope that it wasn't just the same old questions. Hopefully I asked you something different, made you think a little bit. No,
I enjoy that. Yeah. Okay. No, it's all good questions, and a bit different.
Good.
And, it was good.
All right. And one thing for you, for Finland, what's your biggest rivalry in terms of when you guys are playing with the national team? Who's the team you have to beat? Is it Norway or Sweden or Denmark or somebody else?
Yeah, well, we don't really have for example, like Scotland and England, we don't have that sort of, but our neighbors really, I would have to say that when we play Sweden or Russia, there's always something, the history with Russia, being part of them for a long time, and then, the war thing and everything. Russia is probably one of the favorites, and then Sweden, obviously, used to be part of Sweden as well, and
right.
They think we are kind of like little brothers and big brothers and blah blah blah. But, those two countries, I think it's normal, when it's your neighbor.
This has been fantastic for me, and I just hope you had a decent time, and I thank you again.
No problem. I enjoyed that. No worries. My pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much, and hopefully I didn't make you late for the game.
No worries.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Yes. Bye-bye.
That does it for this episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed it. Once again, special thanks to Antti for joining the show, for taking the time out of his day to work with me, to talk with me, to put up with my atrocious questioning at times. I really do appreciate it, and I think the listeners do as well. Special thanks this week goes to Jamie Grant, who runs Saints Report, which is the partner of this podcast. But Jamie did a lot of legwork to make this episode happen. It would not have happened without him. Special thanks this week also goes to Lee Callender, assistant coach and goalkeeping coach at Southampton Women's FC, for helping me kind of frame this, and Michael Kern as well for helping me come up with some questions to make this a little bit more manageable for me and hopefully a better listen for you. And now for the normal stuff. All music comes courtesy of the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The intro song is Epic Song by Boxcat Games, and the end of show credits that you're listening to now is Aim is True by Poddington Bear. The links to those are in the show notes. If you are at all interested, make sure you check them out. Antti Niemi doesn't use Twitter. He is on Instagram. The link is in the show notes if you're interested in following him. You can follow this show on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. We're at SFCDELL_IVERY on Instagram and Twitter. And we're at facebook.com/SFCDelivery. Check it out if you're interested. To make sure you don't miss next week's episode, you can subscribe to this show on iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Google Play, TuneIn Radio, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Just simply search Delivery with 2 L's or click one of the links in the show notes, and that will help you out. If you've been listening to the show for some time and you are enjoying it, please consider leaving a review on iTunes. It really does help spread the show to other people. And as always, share it with a fellow Saints fan. That also helps as well. Lastly, before we go, thank you to everybody who helped make my trip to the UK so special. I had a fantastic time in London and in Southampton. It was a pleasure to see the stadium. My daughter particularly enjoyed the women's match that we got to see. So with all that being said, until next time, remember that together we march on.